Hello, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, my dear viewers. Today, as we mark the 1 month completion of the war between Iran, Israel, and US, we have presented the following data on the total number of death casualties which have been reported by the sources. We are here strictly adhering to the sources like United Nations, WHO, Red Crescent Official, US Pentagon's official Israel, Lebanon, and Iran defense ministries for our data. Now, since it's been a month of the starting of Operation Epic Fury by US and Israel over the Iran, and Iran has started the Operation Trust against the military bases in Middle Eastern countries or which are of US. The death casualties have increased and surged along with the economical ripple conditions. There has been so much white casualties in this region. Israel has recently started the ground invasion in Lebanon against Hezbollah, and it has also forced millions of people mass evacuation. Now we shall look upon the figures. We are presenting this and recording this video on 28th March 2026. So the data is accordance with the 28th March 2026 data. Now we can see here that 1937 civilians were being killed in Iran. A US missile, Tomahawk, struck on an elementary school in Iran, killing almost 200 plus school children at Minab Elementary School and killing also teaching staff. Now, this act of US military was highly criticized and condemned by the international societies and countries worldwide. According to the official Pentagon reports, it was stated that it was a tactical mismatch and an inaccurate target mismatch due to the older data being stored. Actually, the elementary school was first in near to the IRGC control center, which was later removed from that part. Now, because of they are giving the argument that because of the older data, they have struck the school. Now, many international geopolitical analysts have said that there had been 3 simultaneous attacks on the school, and it is now not clear that they had intentionally or unintentionally targeted the school, but it was so much devastating and killed so many innocent children. So we mount the death of the children and the teaching staff. Now, US officials, IRGC bases, along with civilians, a number of health workers of Red Crescent Society were also killed in Iran. About 20 plus Red Crescent Society, it is an international humanitarian society which works in the refuge of humanity, and more than 20 plus Crescent Society workers were killed during the strikes done by US on Iran, and this was also condemned by WHO and worldwide nations because it killed the people who are internationally backed by the law. And 22 people, civilians, were killed in Israel, which were all civilians. 3857 to 5942 Israelis were reported injured when Iran has started launching Shahid missiles and drones on later parts of neighboring countries, as well as its missiles are now reaching till Ras Lafan and Leviathan oil refineries in greater parts of Israel. So we can say that it has started a full-scale wage war on its enemies, and it has been disrupting their infrastructure and military bases. Now, on the Israeli side, we are seeing that 715 children were killed and 809 people, civilians and armed personnel, have been reported injured on the Iranian side, and a total of 22,240 children were injured on the Iranian side. Now, from the starting of this escalation, that is from 28th February 2026, 13 to 15 US soldiers have been killed in a drone attack, which we discussed in our before video, that on a military base in Kuwait, which was attacked during a missile conflict by the Iranian side. Now on March 12, 2026, a US refueling aircraft which was named KC-1 where aircraft was taken down, and it at least killed 6 crew members of US Air Force in western Iraq. Now, after Israeli government's invasion of Lebanon, armed invasion, 1142 civilians have been reported killed and 3,229 were reported injured. Now 1.2 million people have been given the forced evacuation. Almost half of the population of Lebanon has been forced to mass evacuate the southern Lebanon and have been reaching the borders of Iraq and Syria to pass the borders for their safety. Now, as we are seeing that this conflict is raising at its highest peak, we are seeing vulnerabilities in the global economies. We are seeing that ripple effects are affecting each and every country in this globally interconnected world. Now, ripple effects are the effects which can be economical and socio-political, which affects a country's economy, GDP, and overall socio-economic conditions, even if that country is not directly involved in the physical war, because of the naval trade, socio-economic ties, and relations with other countries. This is considered as one of the most vulnerable fractured choke points of the international modern globalized world. Now, as we are seeing that Brent crude. Now, first of all, what is Brent crude? So, Brent crude is the oil sourced from the North Sea. It is a premier global benchmark for crude oil, and it is widely used as one of the basic standards, premium gold standards for trading the gold oil. Now, we are getting the sources strictly from IEA, that is International Energy Association, United Nations, S&P Global Trade, US stock market, and International Oil Group, that Brent crude oil, that is on 28th March 26, it was ranging between $112.57 to $114.81 per barrel, which is quite significant more than our previous data, previous week's report, which stated that the crude oil was priced at $86.34. This price hike has been the reason behind the inflation growth and the increased interest rates by the Federal Bank. Now, on 1 week ago, to compare, the per barrel price was $106.41, which has increased by $6. This is one of the most hiked price, which was $120 per barrel. This was one of the most hiked price during the whole week, which crossed $120. Now, the prolonging conflict has surpassed the largest ever disruption in oil supply of the global world, as stated by IEA. As of March 28, 2026, as stated by economical advisors and worldwide, the oil supply has plunged in geopolitics decline abruptly by 8 million barrels per day. That is, 8 million barrels per day have been halted due to attacks on refinery, closure of Strait of Hormuz, which controls 1/5 of the global oil trade, that is 20%, and 25% of the global LNG trade. Now, before 1 week, a loss of 4.5 to 5 million barrels per day was reported in the mid-March session. Now, it has doubled, that is 8 million barrels per day are now being halted due to this conflict. Approx 17.8 million barrels per day of oil and fuel, 20% of the oil of the world, has been disrupted due to informal closure by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and only a few selective 5 countries are being allowed to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. The 5 selective countries are India, Russia, China, Pakistan, and Turkey, which were allowed to ship essential crude oil and supplies under strict conditions as stated by IRGC. Now, IRGC is charging these countries formally $2 million per ship to pass one ship from the Strait of Hormuz. This informal charge has again raised wide concerns among the international trade unions that it has obstructed the international law of free navigational trade. Now we have been seeing that because of this oil conflict, there has been a very drastic impact on the global economies worldwide. Either it is a developed nation or a developing nation, the global oil crisis has hit every nation. Now we are going to see some of the effects of the oil crisis on some of the countries. Now in the United States, we are getting the data from the official sources over here that West Texas Intermediate WIT has been selling the barrel price at 99.64. In Europe, the Brent crude is priced at $112.57 per barrel. In India, according to the Indian basket crude market, the barrel price was $115.75. In Japan, the Tokyo crude is priced at $120 plus barrel. Means the highest price has been seen on the Japan. This is having a strategic reason behind this, because Japan imports 80% of its oil from the Middle East and other nations. It is having a large number of strategic oil reserves, but still it imports most of the oil from the other countries. So they are facing a wide amount of inflation over there, as this country Japan is already being struck by inflation, and overall they are affecting more by the oil crisis, but they still have strategic oil reserves of more than 200 days. So they are stabilizing, and current talks of between US President Donald Trump and Japanese Prime Minister had happened in the US White House to de-escalate the situation in the Iranian war conflict. Now in China Shanghai crude, we had seen that the oil prices were found at 104.50 cents dollar per barrel. As China, like EU and most South Asian countries like India, imports oil from Middle East, a major price hike has been seen, which Chinese government has to implement half-planned fuel prices hikes to stabilize the market. Now Philippines, the Department of Energy there has listed the per barrel price is $113.39, which is due to 81.6% fuel surge have been seen in the Philippines, and it has been made the government to enforce emergency conditions over there. Now they have started 5 to 4 week government official day, that is only 4 days the government offices will run, and in odd and even system. These countries are widely importing their oil and are heavily reliable on the Middle Eastern countries for their oil supply. So they are in a very vulnerable situation right now, and their population are facing a very large number of oil crisis, and the oil is not only affecting the petroleum or petrochemical products, but it also increases the price of every other commodity which is passed or transported through the petrochemical products, like for example vegetables, fisheries and all other products are passed through sea trade, and all this sea trade depends on the oil. Now oil indirectly affects the prices of all these commodities, and thus the global economies have been facing this wide range ruptures in their economies. Pakistan is in being a very vulnerable situation. They have implemented odd and even system in their countries to have minimal oil or negligible reserves, because they are having no reserves right now. So they have implemented odd and even system. Now Taiwan, the semiconductor capital of the world, is also not an exception in this current war. Now their barrel price is $110 to $115 per barrel. Being a major semiconductor power, it is net importing country. It is a small island, it cannot produce much of its oil on its own. So it relies heavily on Middle Eastern countries for its oil. Now due to the closure of Strait of Hormuz, there has been seen a 19.8% decline in the semiconductor output world's largest tech-heavy and even day-to-day industry products manufacturing at risk. Now, we need helium for the cooling systems in Taiwan to cool the system for further production. Now, the Strait of Hormuz controls one-third, that is 33% of the global helium supply. The helium is not being produced in the very demanded supply way and is not reaching the markets of the Taiwan. Due to this, there has been a decrease in the helium output of the country, and because of this, the cooling systems in Taiwan are becoming more hotter with increase in inflation and decrease in production. This has been the effects on developing and developed nations around the world, strictly from the data from official sites. Now we are discussing on the effects of closure of Strait of Hormuz on various nations and IRGC's informal toll tax for ship passing. Now, according to the international law, maritime trade and navigation law of the UN, any nation cannot ask for a specific fee which is not regulated and coordinated by the UN committee without having a formal acceptance from the international community. Now, due to Iran's specific location, geographical advantage is being earned by them to take $2 million per ship to have the ship pass from the Strait of Hormuz towards the Indian Ocean. Now, the countries which had been allowed to pass through the Strait of Hormuz are also managing to bypass it with other straits like Bab Al Mandeb Strait and Cape of Good Hope, because the war premium risk have surged to 30 to 40 times increased, and even if you are able to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, the war premium prices will make the oil prices unbearable. So in another way, it is becoming a wide issue in the global world, and de-escalation requirements are being called to the UN. Now, India being a developing country, it imports most of its LNG from the Middle Eastern regions. Now, Qatar being its most of the prominent supplier of LNG, the oil and the gas being produced in Qatar cannot be passed to the Strait of Hormuz. Because of this, India has entered into its worst ever LPG crisis. Now, it is leading to the disruption in its industrial output, local consumers, and it has also reached to the closure of many of the hotels due to the lack of LPG cylinders. Now, Government of India, they have assured that the condition is stable, but it's highly subsidized like petrochemical products. Now, it will directly affect the taxpayers' pocket, because whenever a government puts a subsidy on a product, they have to outsource its income from other sources. So indirectly, the charge will be on the income taxpayers, as it will be a long-term fiscal plan must be needed, and diversification of resources must be needed for the India to resupply its LNG and to procure much of its national interest. Now, China has put a strategic ban on oil exports and is currently diversifying its oil needs from Siberia and South America. Now, China has totally banned its oil exports, as they are having oil reserves of more than 150 days, but they are keeping that in mind that if the war is prolonged, their industrial output is not affected. Now, Government of China has put cap prices to stabilize petrochemical products for consumers and industries. Because of the increased global prices of the crude oil, it is directly or indirectly affecting the Chinese industrial output, and to stabilize it, the Government of China has put the price caps on the products and petrochemicals. A large black cloud is swarming on the agricultural products. The big three players of the agriculture, India, Brazil and China, procures most of its fertilizers either from its imports and or are heavily dependent on the sulphur which is outsourced from the Middle Eastern countries. In an oil refinery process, the sulphur is being procured as a byproduct. Now this sulphur is used as a fertilizer, as a product to make the fertilizer, as a raw product to make the fertilizer. So because there has been the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, we are not getting the sulphur, required amount of sulphur to produce fertilizers. Due to this, there has been currently a large disruption in the fertilizer supply of the world too. Now, due to this, the fertilizer prices are hiking in these developing countries, and it may affect the global agricultural prices, and it can have worse effects on its consumers worldwide. Now we are talking about another big black cloud which is happening on the international naval trade now. Bab Al Mandeb Strait, which is a strait, it is one of the global naval choke points located at the southern entrance of the Red Sea. It separates the Asian peninsula, Yemen, from the Horn of Africa, that is Djibouti and Eritrea. I am having map over here. As you can see from your screens, this is Africa, this is Oman, Saudi Arabia, and this is Somalia, Yemen, and Eritrea. So this strait which you can see is the Strait of Bab Al Mandeb. In Arabic, it means the gate of tears. Now, why this Bab Al Mandeb Strait is so much important? It is because it controls almost 10 to 12% of the global maritime trade. It facilitates up to 4 to 9 million barrels per day of crude oil passing from the Africa, Middle East to Europe and Asian countries via Indian Ocean. Now we need to know that it connects Gulf of Aden and Red Sea to Indian Ocean. As its narrowest, it is approx 16 to 32 kilometers wide. Perim Island is a volcanic island belonging to Yemen. It divides it into two channels. It had two channels, the western channel being the large strait and the eastern channel being the small strait. Western channel is 26 kilometers wide and 310 meters deep. It is the primary route for the international trade and shipping. Eastern channel is about 3 kilometers wide and 30 meters in depth, usually used for local traffic. Since late 2023, the Iranian-backed Houthis are having the political crisis in Yemen, and they are since then launching drone attacks and missile attacks on the ships passing by the Bab Al Mandeb Strait. Now, because of this, many of the international shippers and traders like Maersk and other shippers have diverted their routes from Bab Al Mandeb to the Cape of Good Hope to bypass the Strait of Bab Al Mandeb. Now, we are seeing that bypassing Strait of Bab Al Mandeb is not easy, because passing through Cape of Good Hope means adding 6,000 kilometers to reach Europe. Additional 6,000 kilometers, which also requires more than 10 to 20 days to reach there. So it will indirectly increases the cost and timing of the products to reach the Europe. Now at such times, we have been seeing that all these things have led to global disruptions around the world. Now recently, on 29th March, the US Pentagon has supported to stop the attacks on Iran by providing a 15-term long plan, that is the terms, conditions of the treaty for the ceasefire to stop the war. But it was considered a maximalist treaty by Iran and many geopolitical analysts. And on the Iranian side, they have sent 4-point treaty plan. It includes that US must give all the reparations for whatever infrastructure damage has been done to the Iranian side. Now, at this point, there has been no formal table diplomacy which had been seen in other conflicts. So this war can prolong, and there are no predictive events which we can say here. Such events which cannot be predicted and are voluntarily or involuntarily increasing the volatility and unpredictability in the global market and international relations are called black swan events, and such black swan events are currently controlling the Middle Eastern region and the global shipping trade. So in the next video we will discuss about how the governments are approaching towards the treaties and what more conditions are there presented in the current situation.